Think of a white, crystalline, addictive powder. What comes to mind? Crack, heroin, cocaine, prescription, or street drugs? Most people have been fortunate enough to have never encountered any of these substances I just mentioned, and it's common knowledge to avoid these white powders because they can very rapidly and easily turn into an addiction and dependence that can ruin your life. Yet, all of us since childhood have been pushed a similar white powder, and many of us have become addicted. Unlike illicit drugs, sugar not only lurks in plain sight, but also has managed to find itself in the most unexpected places. With over 60 different names, it's made its way into every single one of your meals, unless you've gone out of your way diligently to remove it. Today, it is the largest crop produced worldwide, taking up more agricultural land than rice, corn, wheat, and soy, all while being one of the most resource-intensive yields while offering zero nutritional value. In the back of your mind, I know that part of you has considered reducing or even quitting as a whole because you've heard it's not good for you. Well, I'm here to give you all the reasons as to why this is a good idea, because the more you know, the less you'll want to partake. This is the story of how sugar has changed the world, humanity, and the impact and effect it's having on your personal life. More importantly, in this video, I will share a step-by-step process on how to overcome a sugar addiction and how to regain control over this area in your life. More than anything, we have all been victims of this very powerful drug and have all suffered the consequences in varying degrees. Belonging to the Poaceae grass family, Saccharum officinarum, otherwise known as sugarcane, is believed to have first been domesticated in Southeast Asia, specifically in the island of Papua New Guinea around 1000 BC, where gradually it spread to the rest of Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. For around 1000 years, it was consumed through the peeling and chewing of the stalk until around 2500 years ago in India, where it was first processed and refined into crystals. It was not long after this that this delicacy found its way into the royal European palaces, and the demand for this rare sweet exotic crystal increased. Interestingly enough though, they were not only consuming it, but rather it became an elite status symbol. There's even evidence that elaborate sculptures were being produced as table centerpieces in England. As the luxurious demand increased, so did the production, and because sugarcane is only able to grow in tropical environments, it requires access to such lands. It was predominantly English and French-owned plantations in the West Indies that were responsible for all of the sugar production. Around this time, during the 1500s, Portugal became the first European nation to kidnap African citizens and enslave them. They would then be transported in ships to work in the Caribbean and Brazilian plantations. This was the beginning of the horrific transatlantic slave trade, predominantly fueled by the acquisition of sugar, a non-essential crop. This was also the main motivation for European expansion and colonization, and it has led to what we know to be the Western world today, essentially being rooted in indulgence, greed, exploitation, and human trafficking. Like I mentioned before, the cultivation of sugar demanded extreme intense labor and included very dangerous extraction practices. Not only did the stalks need to be cut by hand, the juice needed to be extracted immediately, otherwise it would go stale. Prior to the harvesting, rows had to be dug, stalks had to be planted, and plenty of wood had to be available in order to boil such massive amounts of sugarcane juice and turn it into molasses and then crystals. Naturally, we evolved only consuming sweetness in either fruit or honey, both being found seasonally and sparingly. Otherwise, we relied exclusively on foraging wild plants and hunting, which resulted in our diet being predominantly bitter, fibrous, and rich in protein. Saliva and chewing being the only processing methods available for extracting the necessary nutrients out of food. With such foods, we very easily became satiated due to the nutrient density, and not to mention, when cooking became an integral part of our eating ritual, it would take hours to gather, hunt, prepare, and consume just one meal. When we eat, our entire organism responds by chemically breaking down food into its major components, which include proteins, fats, carbohydrates, vitamins, minerals, and fiber. Along the way, many hormones are released, such as leptin to mediate our satiety, insulin to regulate our blood sugar and energy levels, and so many more. It's an extremely beautiful and complex biological phenomenon that takes place and converts food into the electrical energy we use to live every single day of our lives. Up until the last 100 years or so, our species predominantly consumed what was grown in the field, and the greatest extent of processing was home cooking. Today, we find ourselves relying on others to do the cooking for us, whether it's through grocery stores with canned, frozen, and packaged foods, restaurants, convenience stores, and or fast food. Convenience, price points, and taste dictate our meals, which have led to the boom in the creation of food-like products, which are specifically engineered to release a drug-like cocktail of neurotransmitters such as dopamine to keep us coming back for more. Food companies flood our culture with emotion-evoking messages that stay in our subconscious. It's gotten to the point where cereal companies design avatars that look down and target children's eye contact. The greatest weapon these companies use to enslave us to desire their products come down to 3 simple ingredients, which not only take a huge toll on the environment, but also your very own physiology as a human. Those 3 secret ingredients are combined in such a way that would never occur naturally. Refined sugar, oil, and salt are the biggest culprits that have entered the food chain and don't seem to be going anywhere. But specifically, why exactly is crystalline sugar bad? Well, let's just start with sugarcane, which is naturally already very sweet, and in order to be consumed without processing, you would have to extensively chew on the fibrous stalks, which would slow down our intake of the natural sugars. Chewing and sucking the juice out of 1 stalk of sugarcane would approximately take you around 15 minutes of diligent work, containing roughly 40 calories, an abundance of vitamin C, antioxidants, potassium, calcium, magnesium, iron, zinc, thiamine, riboflavin, and several amino acids. On the contrary, 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar offers around 49 calories and nothing else nutritionally. What makes this dangerous is the rate at which it can be consumed. To put this into perspective, take 1 can of Coke, which contains roughly around 9 tablespoons of granulated sugar, and virtually can be ingested immediately. Your body is tasked with processing an unnatural amount of sugar in a matter of minutes. So what happens then? Because of the lack of fiber, instead of having a gradual increase in blood sugar, it suddenly now spikes and we feel elated and energized. But within an hour or so, we'll soon crash and our body will want to rebalance itself and will therefore crave that sudden spike once more. See, sugar affects us on a physiological level because it throws off our natural energy levels. But that's not all. Let's address what happens in our brain. When we consume a concentrate of any form, it's going to have a concentrated effect in the release of neurotransmitters. In this case, dopamine levels skyrocket in comparison when consuming the natural sugarcane. Our brain likes to adjust, and since sugar releases extreme doses of dopamine, our brain is constantly seeking to get back to that state. The more our brain considers this dopamine high the new norm, the more it will demand it throughout the day. This is why people who are heavily addicted to sugar wake up in the morning and their first thought is on how and when they will get their fix. Now let's talk about what happens emotionally. Well, culturally, we have associated celebrations and accomplishments with food, but the more special the occasion, the more sugar. Many of us who have ever felt low at some point in our lives might have even turned to sweets for comfort, which might have relieved the pain temporarily, only to later realize that we feel worse about ourselves for indulging. We might even feel ashamed and disgusted for not having had the willpower. This can soon turn into emotional eating and in some extreme cases turn into binge eating, which is an eating disorder that can very quickly derail your mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. In order for something to be classified as addictive, it has to meet these 4 criteria: binging, withdrawal, craving, and cross-sensitization. A study done on rats found that in fact, sugar met all the criteria and the rats demonstrated a sugar dependence as they would with other drug abuse. Binging is defined as the escalating of intake at one time, typically after a period of voluntarily or forced deprivation. Withdrawal presents itself as anxiety, behavioral depression, and overall a lack of calmness, followed by craving, which is defined as extreme motivation. According to Harvard Medical School, our liver metabolizes added sugar in the same way as alcohol and converts excess carbohydrates into fat, stating that over time, this could lead to fatty liver disease and diabetes, which both raise your risk of heart disease. Consuming high levels of added sugar can also raise your blood pressure, which increase inflammation, which is a pathway to many other diseases and ailments. Currently, data suggests that 2/3 of the US population is either overweight or obese, and increasing every single year. As a result, healthcare costs are estimated to range from $147 to $210 billion every year. Diets high in added sugar have been associated as one of the major links in the development of the obesity epidemic, with people consuming more than 300% of the recommended daily intake. The serious negative health effects sugar can have on your health include heart disease, weight gain, diabetes, fat in the blood, higher blood pressure, fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, and gout, to just mention a few. Some less serious yet concerning effects include acne, tooth decay, premature aging, depression, stress, behavior and cognitive issues, suppressed immune responses, and even nutritional deficiencies. To resume, we can confidently say that sugar is not our friend in the long term, but how can we make amends and be on our way towards a healthier life without it? Hi everyone, so I just wanted to come on and say that I know that some of you that are struggling with this addiction, it can be really difficult, it can be really hard, temptation is everywhere, and our willpower can get taken over by these cravings because they're very strong. But the good news is that there is a strategy that you can use today to really surpass this addiction and move forward with your life and really have a healthier relationship with food just in general. And I've applied this strategy in my own personal life, and today I find myself more in control and also more satisfied without sugar in my life. So yes, I'm here to help you overcome this addiction because it's a real phenomenon in our society, and I don't think many people recognize or even realize how dangerous sugar really is, especially for youth and especially for people who are already struggling with health issues. But first we must talk about making a lifestyle change, which is a huge thing and it's not easy to do if you have ever tried, specifically with diet. But we must recognize where we fall in as far as our willingness to change. So there are 5 stages. The first being pre-contemplation, followed by contemplation, followed by preparation, action, and maintenance. Currently I find myself in the maintenance stage, so I feel like I'm able to give some advice. So here we go. First thing you must do is set a SMART goal. And in this case, SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. We must be able to really define our goal in such a way where we're able to measure the results, we're able to know exactly what we're going for, and also we're being realistic and we're giving ourselves a time period to achieve this goal. So for example, if you are struggling with eating candy after a long, stressful day, or going for the cookie or going for the pastries, here's the biggest thing I recommend. Never try to just quit cold turkey unless you're already in the process of removing sugar from your life. I recommend you slowly start reducing the dose of sugar, because what can happen when quitting anything cold turkey, it can actually make the addiction a lot worse. And this is why. If we cut that out completely, our brain goes into a deprivation mode, and it does frantic things in those moments, and emotions take over, and it's so much easier to binge in this fashion. So what I recommend your SMART goal to be, for example, is, let's say you do go to the convenience store and buy 3 candy bars. So instead of buying 3 candy bars tomorrow, buy 2. Only consume 2. That way, you're still getting the rush, but you're slowly reducing the amount. And that way your brain has time to adjust, and also your body, your physiology. The second thing I want to bring up is, during this process of giving up refined sugar and slowly reducing your intake, we also want to let go of any expectation to lose weight. And I know it's super tempting to try and say, you know what, I'm gonna cut out sugar and I'm gonna lose 10 pounds and my life is gonna change forever. But when has that ever really worked? You know, without being strategic. So this is the strategy. Let go. Let go of any expectation to lose weight, because ultimately this is what happens. When we set an expectation as far as our physical appearance comes into play, that takes time. It takes so much time. And we're in a volatile space when we're addicted to a substance such as sugar. So let go of any expectation to lose weight. And I guarantee you, if you let go of the expectation, it will be much easier, because you won't be disappointed after putting in so much effort to try and reduce your sugar intake. And naturally, as you start reducing your sugar intake, you will automatically be losing weight in the long term, because you will drastically reduce your caloric intake if you follow the steps I'm about to mention. So here are the guidelines that I used, the 10 guidelines I have used that have helped me overcome my sugar addiction, and I'm happy to share with you today. So the first one being to read labels very carefully, because sugar has up to 60 different names and it can be hidden within the ingredients list. So the less ingredients in the packaging, the better. In general, the less food labels you have to read, the better. Number 2, focus on replacing processed foods and restaurant meals and eating out with more home-cooked meals. This is what by far the number one thing that has helped me in my personal journey in health and overcoming addictions and dependence on substances like sugar, is cooking our own food. That's the power that we have over this super sacred area in our life that our health and our life depends on. Number 3, avoid using sweeteners in your beverages. Make your predominant drink of choice water, and if you're not used to it, you can add fruits, you can add herbs, you can make teas, but slowly start drinking more pure substances and you'll find that slowly you'll start coming off of sugar. Number 4, don't get caught up by natural sweeteners. And I know it can be really tempting, because we might say like, oh, agave is so much healthier for us than sugar, or coconut nectar, coconut sugar, aminos. In essence, they're slightly less refined, but they're still concentrates, and your body still will react the same way regardless if you're eating table sugar or maple syrup. So don't get caught up by the natural sweeteners. Number 5, eat fat with each meal. And I recommend this because if we're consuming mainly carbohydrates, which are sugars essentially, our body is going to also have a peak in our energy balance, and then it's gonna drop, and then we're gonna feel hungry again. So the more fat you eat, the more satiated you'll feel after every meal, and you won't have a craving or a need, a physiological need, or even mental sometimes need to want to keep eating. So number 6, also eat more protein with each meal. And what I mean by protein is you could get it from plants, you could get it from animals, although I highly recommend getting it from plants, making sure that your meals are balanced for the same reasons as adding more fat into your diet. Number 7 is remove temptation. So you know the saying, out of sight, out of mind? Well, it applies in this specific area, because if something is not convenient for us, we most likely won't go out of our way to obtain it. For example, if you keep cookies around or any sugary snacks, you're gonna most likely eat them. So do your best to try and avoid areas where sugar is highly available and where you might be triggered. Number 8 is keep other sweets around, and by that I mean have fruit available, have other snacks available at all times, because you don't want to be hungry one day and you have no food and all there is your coworker's donuts, and now you eat the donut and now your body reacts in a drug-like way, and all of a sudden you're like back on the contemplation stage. So yes, stock up on as much healthy food as you can. And lastly, and this one is extremely important, never antagonize a food. That's just in general a law. Not even sugar, really. But instead, learn to see sugar as what it really is. Sugar is a widely available drug that has pretty serious consequences, but can be enjoyed from time to time, like alcohol and like other recreational drugs. But it's way more highly available than any other drug. So I recommend, not being afraid of sugar. And also remember the saying that goes, what you resist persists. Yes, this applies so much in this point, because if you obsess over not eating sugar, you're constantly going to have sugar in your mind anyway. The thing to do is to accept sugar, accept what it is, accept having it and not having it. And slowly but surely, your body will start adjusting naturally to not having it as much, and it will have a more natural reaction to sugar. So those are the 10 tips, you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video until the end. And if you know anyone that's struggling with this, then please share this with them. And as always, stay grateful, stay healthy. NaturesBest.